So welcome back to module 3. And in this one, we're going to level up our pages by adding lists, links, and images. Now, these are foundational elements of the web. And by the end of this video, your About Me page is going to look a lot more dynamic. Now, just like before, I'm going to be coding inside our online HTML editor. So just join me in there and follow along step by step. And remember, again, if you want to dive deeper into anything that I touch upon, whether it's how an image tag works or you want tips for accessibility, have a look at Asking Mentor, and it's always there for extra help if you need it within the platform. So let's dive into our editor now and start adding some lists. So I'm back within the editor. I have got my pre-loaded file here, which is the project that we're working on. But I think rather than editing this right away, what we're going to do is we're going to open a new project and just have a look at the basics of lists. So I could click on plus here and just open a brand new project. And I could then just delete everything that's in here, just make it nice and blank, which is a nice way to keep things clear. And let's talk about lists. Okay, so we have two types of lists in the HTML. Unordered, as in there is no ordering, or an ordered list. So an unordered list, we use a UL, and this is for bulleted lists essentially. And within that, we use an LI for each list item. So UL, unordered list, LI, list item. So let's have a look at it. Let me create one right now. So I create a UL, and then within that, I create an LI. Okay. And then I could add this reading, and then I could close my LI tag like so. Then I could create another list item, and we could say cycling, close that again. Then I could create another list item. This could be eating, close that again. And then if I want to close off my unordered list, I use a closing tag. So I've opened and closed my list in total, and I've got each item. So imagine this is a list and these are bullets. And if I type this into my editor like I have here, and if you follow me, click run, there's the output, a bulleted list. This is an unordered list. Okay, now let's look at an ordered list. Okay, so let's go here. And an ordered list is simply with an OL tag rather than an ordered list, which is a UL. And this could be, for instance, your morning routine. So we could use an LI again for a list item. Always a list item is an LI within an ordered or unordered list. It's the same. LI, and then we could say make coffee. And then we could add another item, and we could say write HTML, which is what I've done today. And then I'm going to come down, close out my ordered list, click run, and there we go. It's ordered, it's now numbered. Because it's an order, there has to be a sequence. And notice the only difference is I've used an OL instead of a UL. I could change this right now back to a UL, run, and we now get bullets. That's it. So the only difference is the actual wraparound. So we're wrapping this in a UL or an OL, depending whether you want bullets or numbers. Great. Okay, now let's move away from lists. I'm going to get rid of that, delete this. Let's talk about hyperlinks. Now, these let us connect to other pages or websites. And here is a basic example of hyperlink. So it's an A tag, href equals, and then let's add in the address. So https hackr.io. Okay, I could then add the following. Visit hackr.io. Then I would close my href anchor tag there with that A. Okay, so the href attribute is what tells the browser where to go. Okay, and this bit in the center is the actual title of the link. So if I were to run this now, let's see what we get on the output. Visit hackr.io, it's a link. And if I clicked on this, it would take me to hackr.io. Really simple. So the href attribute is essential. This tells us where to go, and this is the title. If I wanted to, I could delete that, but it makes sense quite often to have the title. Okay. So what if I wanted to write an email address? Okay, here's an example. So it's again with an A tag, got href, but this time instead of adding in just a plain email address, or rather plain web address, I would add mail to, then I could add info, for instance, at hackr.io. And then I could change this. For instance, I could add the following, which would just be email me. And then if I were to run this, you'd see that would change. And if I click on this, it would open up your computer's default email operating app, and you'd then be able to write an email directly to this email address. You could also use a telephone if you want to add a telephone link. So rather than mail to, we could add this tel, and then I could add a number, and I could say, call me, and then this would add a tel with the number. So this is super useful for mobile. Now, links are obviously an essential part of all web pages. And quite often you can be mostly using probably hyperlinks with actual web addresses. So for instance, this thing here is a web address. And this is one of the most common ways they'll be using this. And I think you'll find that if you need any extra help with this, Mentor will be great at helping you get deep into how hyperlinks work, and especially how the anchor tag and the href attribute works. Okay, so now we've covered visiting web pages, sending email addresses, and using phone links. Let's move on to images. Okay, so I'm going to clear everything and we can talk about images. So let's add an image tag. And to do this, we use the img tag. Okay, so this is an img tag, and within this, we need a source attribute, and this is where we are going to include the source of our image. Now, let's talk about something. First of all, this one doesn't need a closing tag. So before with href, we had a closing a tag. With image, we don't need to. It's self-closing, so you don't need a closing tag. Now, if we wanted to add an image, what could we add? Well, we need to add a HTTPS address, either a web address from where the image is located, or if we're working on a local environment, we can just literally link to the name of the image we want. So for instance, say you're doing this on your own computer rather than a web browser, and within the directory where you're storing your HTML files, you've got an image called myimage.png. Well, that would work. It would find that image and it would load it for you. Now we're doing this in an online browser. So for the argument's sake, within this, we're going to add an online hosted image to give an example. So I'm going to copy in an image here rather than using this locally stored image. And here we go. And then what I also want to do is I'm going to add an alt tag, and I'm going to add within this the following. Notice I wrap it in quotes because it is a string. And then I simply close that image tag. Now let's talk about what we've got here. So the source attribute is the image's URL, and the alt tag is the text that shows that the image can't load. So this helps with accessibility, and it is great practice. Now again, because I'm working in a browser-based environment, I'm using an image URL rather than a local file on my computer. Now, of course, if I would add in a file like myimage.png, this won't work here unless the image is actually online. So this is going to be the way we're going to do things within this course. We'll work on image URLs, but it's very simple to switch back to locally stored images. So let's just run this now and see what we get. So there we go. We get a snowy landscape. It has loaded the image for us. Excellent. If I were to break this, let me just remove a few parts and see if I can run this and see what we get. Still works. Great. So everything's okay. So we could probably, I suspect, get rid of all of these query strings because we don't necessarily need those. And we can run this again and it still works, but now the image is much larger because obviously we weren't specifying the size. So if I then try and break this and click run, we get snowy landscape because the alt tag now kicks in because the image can't be found. So that's why you need alt tags. Alt tags are there to describe what should be there if the image isn't working properly. Okay, great. So now we have done a little bit of familiarizing ourselves with lists, links, and images. The next stage is to work on expanding our About Me page. Okay, so I'm going to reload my About Me project, and we are then going to add a new heading for hobbies, add an unordered list, and add a link to our favorite website and insert an image using a URL. So let's now reload. So we could go down here, save projects, HTML, and then we can load our About Me, and we are back in the project that we're already working in this course. So now we've got My Hobbies is a new section that we want to create. So let's now create a new H2 section. So we had My Interests. Why don't we change that to My Hobbies instead? Okay. And then rather than having this paragraph tag, let's get rid of that and let's create an unordered list with UL. And then let's create some list items and let's change it up. Let's say it's photography. Then we could also say baking, which is true. I do like baking. And then we could add cycling. Great. And then we need to obviously close out our unordered list. Excellent. And then beneath that, let's create a new paragraph tag. And let's say, check out my favorite website. Okay. And then beneath that, we could add a link. And maybe in this, let's link to something interesting like National Geographic, for argument's sake. So if that was your favorite website, you could add HTTPS and we can add www.nationalgeographic.com. And then we will simply close that, add some text. National Geographic. and close that again. Excellent. And then we could close out our key tag as well for our paragraph. Great. Now, one thing that we could add, an extra attribute within here, is that we could add a target. If I added target and if I added the following, this would add the message to the href tag that should be opened in a new tab or a new window. Okay, so that's something that you often do as well with your hyperlinks. So now that we have this, let's now add an image. Okay, so let's add an image. We've got the source attribute. And for this image, I'm going to copy in the following, which should be a helpful image to include. And then let's give it an alt tag of mountain landscape. And then let's set the width. This way we could actually control the size. And let's say it is 400 pixels. And then we close our image tag like so. All right, then. So let's talk about what we've got here. We have added an unordered list with some list items. We've added a new paragraph tag with an href or a hyperlink within that. And we've also added an image. And notice that with the hyperlink, we've added target equals blank, which means it will open a new tab. And this is a great way to really build out and expand on our page. Now, if we run this code, let's have a look what we get in our output here. So excellent. If I want to maximize this, you can now see we've now got the My Hobby section with the list. We've got the link to National Geographic. We've got our image with an alt tag, and everything else is unchanged from before. Fantastic. It's really coming along. So the next thing we should do is we should save our progress. So I've clicked save, project saved successfully. Everything is now ready to move on with. Excellent job. You're doing an awesome job. You now know how to add structure, navigation, and visual content to your pages. Don't forget to test your code, tweak it, and make it personal. And once you're done, hit the next module button and we'll move on to styling our page with CSS. And I will see you there.